A lot of Americans haven't gotten a pay raise in years, and they can't find jobs that pay enough to actually cover their expenses. And trade agreements like NAFTA are a big part of that, because NAFTA's core text actually included incentives to promote the outsourcing of good middle-class jobs. It also has protections for the big pharmaceutical companies and the banks that actually raise prices. So while our wages are going down, the expenses that we face are going up. And these things, of course, have nothing to do with trade, because the dirty little secret about NAFTA is it's not even mainly about trade. If you look at NAFTA's sum total in 23 years, it may have made some big, booming profits for a handful of really big multinational companies. But for working people in the US and Mexico, for small businesses, for independent farmers, it's been a disaster. And we got to replace it.
Corporate America and the big money interests have told us that NAFTA is a good deal. I don't believe them.
In a few moments, I will sign the North American Free Trade Act into law.
If President Trump fails to get a new NAFTA that actually raises standards and wages in the three countries, there's still going to be a big pull for companies to leave for Mexico. Wages in Mexico right now are 9% lower than they were before NAFTA started.
We are on the verge of a global economic expansion that is sparked by the fact that the United States at this critical moment decided that we would compete, not retreat.
The American worker and family farmer should not be asked to compete against the desperate people of Mexico who are forced to work for a minimum wage of 58 cents an hour.
So the manufacturing workers in Mexico now get paid between $1.50 and $1.80 an hour. We need them to get a raise, not just because it's the morally right thing, because that's what's necessary to stop the draw of U.S. jobs to Mexico.
As you all know, when Donald Trump campaigned for president, he promised that he was going to stop corporations from shipping American jobs to Mexico and other low-wage countries, that he would renegotiate NAFTA and other trade deals to make them much better for American workers. But as we speak, the renegotiation of NAFTA is being done behind closed doors, with 500 corporate lobbyists and executives who are working overtime to protect their interests at the expense of the working people of this country. We are here today to send a very loud and clear message to Donald Trump: for once in your life, keep your promises.
The heat's really on for President Trump to succeed in getting a new deal. He campaigned across the Midwest. Part of the reason he's here is promising people he would fix our trade mess. Bernie Sanders and other progressives in the Senate and in the House and labor unions, the environmental and consumer groups have been saying it's a damn mess for decades. So we definitely need a new policy. The problem is, so far, the Trump administration has been mainly talk and not a lot of action.
All talk, no action.
One of President Trump's promises was on day one he was going to do something to try and get the China trade deficit back in whack. And that's a huge honking deficit of over $300 billion. They've done nothing. And in fact, they explicitly flip-flopped on the promise to do something on China currency that was supposed to happen in day one. What we need really is a transformation in these renegotiations. So here's what would be in a progressive trade agreement. First of all, start with NAFTA. Take out all the incentives for outsourcing. NAFTA has investor rules that make it cheaper and less risky to outsource jobs. It has rights to outsource jobs and still get government contracts, basically throwing out Buy America. So you can make it there and still sell it to the US government. You can have Chinese inputs, pretend it's American made, and sell it under NAFTA. All of those incentives to do the wrong thing have to be removed. Then you got to put in the stuff that's missing. And this is true of all of our trade agreements, because they all have the same garbage. It's the same model. NAFTA hatched the whole lot of them. So then you have to add the stuff that's missing, like labor standards that are based on the fundamental international standards of the International Labor Organization, environmental standards based on the existing multilateral environmental agreements, and they have to have swift and certain enforcement. Even when there have been standards in these agreements, they have not been enforced. That has got to end. The agreement going into effect has to be conditioned on all the countries actually meeting those rules. That's the only way we're going to raise wages. And then we also need to make sure that the agreement doesn't overstep what should be in agreements. This is true of all of our trade agreements. There can be great benefits in expanded trade. We have to get the rules right. So take out the corporate goodies, put in the floor of decency, and remove all the corporate protectionism that's now hitching a ride in the name of trade agreement.
On this issue, the need for fair trade rather than unfettered free trade. The American people are with us. Let's go forward together, and let's create a trade policy that works for all of us, not just the CEOs.